The mug shattered against the cafe floor, flung by a drunken hand toward the little girl in the wheelchair, and time seemed to tear open as gasps replaced conversation, coffee cooling untouched on trembling tables. The German shepherd exploded into motion like liquid lightning, muscles locking into place as he shielded the child, a low warning rumble rising from his chest. Calm, controlled, deadly serious. The man laughed, wide stance, crooked grin that never reached his eyes holding something darker, something cracked by life. In that frozen heartbeat, no one yet understood they were witnessing the moment everything would change. If you believe courage can appear when it's needed most, subscribe to the channel now for more stories of hope, protection, and quiet miracles you don't want to miss. A pale autumn sun hovered above Asheville, North Carolina, filtering through mountain mist and settling softly over the brick-lined streets near Blue Ridge Cafe. Emily Parker sat near the cafe's front window, her wheelchair positioned carefully beside a small round table that had become hers through quiet routine. She was 8 years old, small for her age, with straight light blonde hair cut just below her chin, the kind that never stayed tidy no matter how carefully it was brushed. Her skin was fair and freckled across a dessous the nose, her blue eyes strikingly calm, observant in a way that felt older than childhood. Since the accident 2 years earlier, a hit-and-run on a rain-darkened crosswalk that took her parents and left her paralyzed from the waist down, Emily had learned how to sit still inside herself. She spoke softly, chose words carefully, and watched people with the patience of someone who had learned that moments could break without warning. At her left side lay Rex, a 3-year-old German shepherd with a powerful black and tan coat and an intelligent, angular face that seemed carved rather than born. His ears stood alert even at rest, his chest broad, his posture precise. Rex wore a mobility assist harness fitted snugly over his shoulders, designed to help Emily with balance and transfers. He had been trained not only to assist her physically, but to read her breathing, her tension, the subtle shifts in her body that signaled pain or fear. Off-duty, he could be playful in small, careful ways. On duty, he became something else entirely, quiet, immovable, watchful. Across from Emily sat Nora Whitman, her maternal aunt and legal guardian. Nora was 62, tall and slender, with silver-gray hair pulled into a low, practical bun. Years of caregiving had sharpened her posture and etched faint lines around her mouth and eyes. Her skin was pale, her hands veined but steady, and her manner blended warmth with constant vigilance. She spoke gently to Emily but scanned rooms instinctively, a woman who no longer believed the world would behave if left unwatched. The cafe was calm that morning, soft music, the hiss of steaming milk, quiet conversations layered like fabric. Emily traced the edge of her book with one finger while Rex rested his chin briefly on his paws, eyes half-lidded but aware. For a moment it felt like a life that could pass unnoticed. The door swung open hard. Brad Lawson stumbled inside, trailing the sharp scent of alcohol despite the early hour. He was in his early 40s, thick-necked, broad through the shoulders, with a flushed face and thinning brown hair slicked back by sweat. His jacket hung crooked, his movements exaggerated, careless. There was a sneer fixed to his mouth, the expression of a man who mistook attention for power. His voice rose immediately, too loud, laughter slurred and empty. His eyes landed on Emily, then Rex. "Well, look at that," Brad said, words dripping with mockery. "They let dogs in now, huh? Even big scary ones." He laughed again, harsher this time, and swayed closer. Rex lifted his head. His body shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders tightening, spine aligning between Emily and the approaching threat. Emily felt the change before she saw it, her hand settling lightly on the harness strap, a practiced grounding touch. Brad leaned forward, pointing at the wheelchair. "What's the dog for? Decoration? Before Nora could speak, a chair scraped softly against the floor behind them. Ethan Cole stood up from a table near the entrance. He was 35, tall, and solidly built, with the controlled strength of someone who had spent years carrying weight that wasn't always physical. His dark hair was cut short, military neat, and a trimmed beard outlined a sharp jaw marked by a faint scar near the chin. His eyes were gray-blue, steady, the kind that didn't wander. He wore a plain dark jacket over a t-shirt, jeans worn at the knees, nothing that announced his past. But his posture did. So did the way the noise in the room seemed to quiet around him. Ethan had learned silence the hard way. After years as a Navy SEAL, after missions that ended with names he no longer spoke aloud, he had returned to civilian life carrying a discipline that never turned off and a temper he worked daily to keep buried. Crowds made him uneasy. Bullies made something colder wake up behind his ribs. "Step back," Ethan said, voice level, not raised. Brad snorted, turning toward him. "Mind your business." Ethan moved one measured step closer. Rex rose smoothly to his feet, placing his body fully between Emily and Brad, head high, eyes locked. A low warning sound forming deep in his chest. Not a bark, not yet. Emily looked up at Ethan. For a second their eyes met. She saw something familiar there, not anger, control. "Sir," Emily said quietly, her voice steady, despite the tension tightening her chest, "please leave us alone." Brad hesitated. The room held its breath. Rex did not move. And in that suspended moment, none of them yet understood that this confrontation, born of cruelty, restraint, and an unexpected alliance, had already shifted the course of all their lives. The cafe did not erupt. It tightened. Sound thinned to the scrape of a cup, the click of a phone camera starting to record, the faint hiss of the espresso machine. Ethan Cole stood squarely between Brad Lawson and the small island of safety formed by Emily Parker and her German shepherd. He kept his shoulders relaxed, palms open, breathing slow. Habits drilled into him long before the mountains of North Carolina replaced the deserts of his past. Ethan's face, angular and weathered despite his age, showed no anger. What lived behind his eyes was calculation, the calm that came from knowing when a situation could tip and how little pressure it took. Brad swayed, eyes narrowing as if the room had betrayed him. He was not violent by nature, just careless and cruel in the way men sometimes became when alcohol sharpened insecurity into a blade. He leaned forward again, a half step too far. Rex answered with precision. A single step forward, head level, body broad, stance anchored. The dog's growl deepened, not louder, just clearer. Emily's fingers curled into the fabric of Rex's harness, the contact steadying both of them. She felt fear, yes, but it ran alongside a quieter certainty. Rex had done this before. He would not fail her now. Nora Whitman rose slowly from her chair, careful not to startle anyone. Her silver hair caught the light, her posture straight despite the years. "Sir," she said, voice firm, without sharpness, "you need to leave." She placed herself just behind Emily's shoulder, a human echo of Rex's protective geometry. Brad scoffed, turning his attention back to Ethan. "Who made you boss?" he slurred. Ethan did not answer immediately. He measured distance, weight distribution, Brad's breathing. He noticed the way Rex's ears flicked at a sudden sound near the door, how the dog tracked movement without losing focus. "No one," Ethan said at last. "But this ends here." The cafe manager, a woman named Linda Moore, approached from the counter with a practiced calm that came from years of de-escalating lesser storms. She was in her late 40s, average height, brown hair pulled back tight, eyes alert behind rectangular glasses. "Sir, we don't tolerate harassment," she said, already reaching for the phone behind her back. "Please leave, or I'll call the police." Brad laughed again, a brittle sound. He took one last step, reaching toward Emily's book as if to prove he could. Rex's response was immediate and controlled, a sharp bark that cracked the air and froze Brad mid-motion. It was not an attack, it was a line. The door opened then, letting in a rush of cool mountain air and two uniformed officers who had been flagged down by a passer-by. Officer Sarah Mills entered first. She was in her early 30s, tall and athletic, blonde hair braided tight at the nape of her neck, her face open but serious. Years on the Asheville police force had given her a steady presence and an instinct for reading rooms. Her partner, Officer Daniel Perez, followed, a stocky man with dark hair and a calm, watchful demeanor. "Everyone take a breath," Sarah said, voice clear and grounded. Her eyes moved quickly, Brad's flushed face, Ethan's controlled stance, Rex's posture, Emily's hand on the harness. Understanding assembled itself without needing words. Brad protested, gesturing wildly, insisting it was just jokes. Sarah listened without indulging him, then turned to Emily and Nora, kneeling to bring herself level with the wheelchair. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Emily nodded once, chin lifting. Rex remained steady, gaze flicking to Sarah, assessing, then settling. After statements were taken and phones lowered, Brad was escorted out, grumbling and unsteady. The cafe exhaled, chairs shifted back into place. Sound returned. Linda offered free refills with a tremor in her smile. Outside, Ethan lingered near the door, as if unsure where to put his hands now that they were no longer needed. Sarah stepped over to him, studying his face with professional curiosity. "You handled that well," she said. "Military?" "Former," Ethan replied. She nodded, accepting the weight of the word. "Your timing mattered." Ethan glanced back to Emily. She was speaking softly to Rex, forehead pressed briefly to his as if sharing a secret. Nora caught Ethan's eye and gave a small, grateful nod. It surprised him how much it landed. Gratitude had always made him uncomfortable. It implied a future connection. As Sarah finished her report, Emily looked up again, this time directly at Ethan. "Thank you," she said simply. Not loud, not dramatic. Enough. Ethan felt something shift, subtle and unavoidable. He had stepped in to stop a moment. He was leaving with the sense that the moment had stopped him instead, marking a boundary he hadn't known he needed to redraw. Rex settled back into a downstay, crisis complete. Outside, the autumn light brightened as if nothing had happened at all. The cafe returned to motion in cautious increments. Cups were lifted, chairs realigned, conversations resumed in softer keys, as if the room had learned a new volume. Outside, Asheville's morning had brightened, the mist thinning along the street like a curtain pulled back too quickly. Ethan Cole remained near the doorway, aware that leaving too soon would feel like abandonment, staying too long like intrusion. He chose stillness, the habit of a man who had learned that waiting often revealed more than action. Emily Parker traced the edge of her book again, though she wasn't reading. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a hollowed calm behind her ribs. Her breathing slowed under Rex's steady presence. The German Shepherd, 3 years old and fully grown, had returned to a relaxed downstay, but his awareness never truly powered off. His dark eyes tracked movement, ears pivoting subtly with each shift in the room. To anyone else he looked calm. To Emily he felt like gravity. Nora Whitman accepted a fresh cup of coffee from Linda Moore with a nod. Her hands trembled slightly now that the danger had passed. Caregivers learned to postpone fear. It arrived later, asking for attention when it was safe to listen. She glanced toward Ethan again, measuring him with the practiced assessment of a woman who had learned to judge character quickly for survival's sake. He looked tired, not the kind fixed by sleep, but the deeper exhaustion of restraint. Officer Sarah Mills finished her report at the counter, then crossed back toward Emily and Nora, Up close, she seemed younger than she had moments ago, the sharpness easing from her face. "If you want to file a formal complaint, we can help with that," she said. Given the circumstances, it would be supported. Nora considered it, then shook her head. "I want Emily to decide," she said quietly. Emily looked up, surprised. Adults rarely handed her decisions without padding. She thought of Brad's face, the way cruelty had worn him like a costume that didn't fit. "I don't want to keep him in my head," she said after a moment. "I want him gone." Sarah nodded, respect plain. "That's enough." Ethan watched the exchange with something like relief. He had spent years around orders and outcomes. Witnessing choice, real choice, felt rarer. When Sarah turned toward him, he straightened slightly. "You don't have to stay," she said. "But if you'd like to leave your contact information, it could help if anything follows." Ethan hesitated, then handed over a simple card. No rank, no insignia, just his name and number. "If he comes back," he said. "He won't," Sarah replied, "but it's good you're here." The word "here" echoed longer than he expected. When the officers departed, the cafe's windows reflected a gentler world. Linda put out a small plate of cookies, on the house. Rex lifted his head, sniffed politely, then settled again when Emily murmured his name. The crisis had ended. What remained was quieter and harder to name. Ethan approached the table at last, careful with his distance. Up close, Emily's freckles stood out more, a scatter of stars across pale skin. "I'm Ethan," he said, voice low. "I won't stay long." Emily studied him with the seriousness that unsettled most adults. "You didn't yell," she said. "I try not to," Ethan answered. It was the closest he came to a confession. Nora smiled despite herself. "Thank you for stepping in," she said. "We manage. But sometimes managing needs help." Ethan nodded, accepting the truth without embellishment. He crouched slightly to Rex's level, careful not to invade space. "Good work," he said softly. Rex's tail tapped the floor once, controlled approval. A man from a nearby table approached then, older, balding, voice tentative. "My brother trained dogs," he said to no one in particular. "Never seen control like that." He nodded toward Rex and retreated, as if leaving a token of acknowledgement behind. Emily tilted her head. "You were scared?" she said to Ethan, not unkindly. He met her gaze. Lying would be easier. "Yes," he said, "but not of him." She considered that, then smiled faintly. "Me neither." Outside, the street hummed. Ethan stepped back, the decision forming without ceremony. "If you ever need someone to walk with you to the cafe," he said, glancing at Nora, "I live nearby." Nora weighed the offer, then nodded once. "That would be welcome." Ethan left then, the bell above the door chiming softly. Emily watched him go until the reflection swallowed his shape. Rex shifted closer to her wheel, warmth steady. The day had not broken them. It had, unexpectedly, widened their circle. 2 days after the incident, Asheville wore rain like a held breath. A fine drizzle darkened the sidewalks and softened the sharp angles of the city, turning traffic into a low, steady hiss. Ethan Cole walked with deliberate pace along the curb toward Blue Ridge Cafe, collar turned up, hands loose at his sides. He had not planned to come back so soon. Plans, he had learned, were fragile things. But something unfinished tugged at him, the kind of quiet obligation that followed you home and sat patiently until acknowledged. Inside the cafe, Emily Parker sat at her usual table, a thin blanket folded neatly across her legs, despite the mild weather. Her posture was upright, composed, the practiced balance of a child who had learned to claim space without taking too much of it. Her blonde hair was braided today, tight and practical, a choice that suggested focus. Rex lay beside her, his black and tan coat brushed to a dull sheen, eyes alert but calm. The German Shepherd was 3 years old, strong and disciplined, yet carried a gentleness in the way he angled his body toward Emily, always leaving her room to move. Nora Whitman stood at the counter speaking with a man Ethan did not recognize. The man introduced himself moments later as Thomas Reed, a physical therapist in his early 40s, tall and lean with sandy hair and an easy smile that never crossed into carelessness. His skin bore the faint tan of someone who spent time outdoors, and his voice carried reassurance without condescension. He specialized in pediatric mobility rehabilitation and had been working with Emily twice a week. Experience had taught him patience. A motorcycle accident years earlier had ended his competitive running career and redirected his life toward helping others rebuild theirs. Emily's upper body strength has improved, Thomas was saying, kneeling to her eye level. We're ready to introduce a new transfer technique. Emily nodded, serious. Rex helps with balance, she said, and Rex will keep doing that, Thomas replied, glancing at the dog with professional respect. But I want you to know how strong you are, too. Ethan paused near the entrance, unwilling to interrupt. He watched as Emily attempted a controlled shift in her seat, hands braced, shoulders engaged. Rex adjusted instantly, leaning just enough to stabilize without taking over. The teamwork struck Ethan harder than he expected. In the teams he'd served on, trust was survival. Here, trust was independence. Nora noticed him then and gave a small wave. Ethan approached, rainwater darkening the cuffs of his jeans. I didn't mean to intrude, he said. You're not, Nora replied. You're becoming familiar. She surprised herself with the warmth in her tone. Thomas rose and extended a hand. Thomas Reed, he said. You must be Ethan. Ethan shook his hand, grip firm but brief. I was just passing by. Good timing, Thomas said. We were about to practice navigating wet surfaces. He nodded toward the rain-streaked window. Real-world conditions. Emily looked up at Ethan, eyes bright with something close to anticipation. Rex listens better when you're calm, she said. Ethan almost smiled. They moved to the covered patio, rain tapping rhythmically overhead. The concrete was slick, reflective. Thomas explained the exercise, voice measured, while Nora hovered nearby, her anxiety contained but present. Ethan stood off to the side, hands clasped loosely behind his back, resisting the urge to step in. This was not his operation. He reminded himself of that. Emily maneuvered carefully, wheels aligned, breath steady. Rex paced beside her, matching speed, harness taut but gentle. Halfway across the patio, a sudden clatter sounded, a tray slipping inside the cafe. Emily startled, muscles tightening. The chair veered slightly. Before Thomas could speak, Rex adjusted, planting his weight, steadying the motion. Emily recovered, exhaling slowly. She did not look frightened. She looked focused. Well done, Thomas said softly. Ethan felt a familiar heat behind his sternum. Pride without ownership. It was a dangerous emotion for someone like him. He turned his gaze outward to the gray line of the street, grounding himself. When the exercise ended, Thomas packed up his equipment. I'll see you Friday, he said to Emily. To Nora, he added, consistency is working. After he left, silence settled again. Nora broke it first. You didn't have to come back, she said to Ethan, not unkindly. I know, Ethan replied, but I wanted to be sure. Of what? Emily asked. That the world didn't get smaller after yesterday, he said. Emily considered this, then shook her head. It didn't, she said, and it got louder. But Rex knows how to make space. Ethan nodded. He understood that language. As he prepared to leave, rain easing into mist, Nora spoke again. We walk here every morning, she said. Sometimes this company helps. Ethan met her eyes. The invitation was simple. The responsibility was not. I can walk, he said. Emily watched him go, Rex's head following the retreating steps. The day closed gently around them, the promise of routine restored, altered, but intact. Autumn arrived fully in Asheville, the way healing often did, quietly, without announcement, but unmistakable once it settled in. The mountains blazed with copper and gold. leaves collecting along sidewalks like gentle punctuation marks. Blue Ridge Cafe opened its doors to a cooler light, the kind that invited people to linger rather than rush. Emily Parker rolled through the entrance with practiced ease, her wheelchair wheels humming softly over the threshold. She was 8 years old and carried herself with a confidence that had grown sturdier over recent weeks. Her hair was tucked beneath a soft knit cap, wisps of blonde escaping around her temples, freckles bright against fair skin warmed by the season. There was laughter in her eyes now, still careful, still earned, but present. At her side walked Rex, the German shepherd moving in perfect sync with her pace. His coat had thickened slightly for fall, black and tan catching the light. His posture relaxed but attentive. He was 3 years old, fully in his strength, and today his tail swayed more freely than usual, as if he sensed celebration. Nora Whitman followed behind them, her silver hair loose beneath a scarf, her expression lighter than it had been in years. Caregiving had not become easier, but it had become shared, and that difference softened the sharpest edges of her vigilance. She had learned to trust small joys again, coffee that stayed warm, mornings that didn't fracture. Ethan Cole was already there, standing near the window with a mug cupped in both hands. He looked different, too. His beard was trimmed, his shoulders less tightly drawn, the permanent tension in his jaw eased by something like purpose. 35 years of life had shaped him into angles and restraint, but lately there was a gentler geometry to his movements. He still carried the past, the missions, the losses, but they no longer led him by the collar. Helping Emily had not erased his scars. It had given them context. "You're early," Emily said, smiling as Rex guided her into position beside the table. "Couldn't miss today," Ethan replied. Today mattered because it marked 6 weeks since the cafe incident, and because Blue Ridge Cafe was hosting a small, informal gathering. Linda Moore had insisted. "Community likes to see good things finished," she'd said. So there were balloons near the counter, a hand-lettered sign that read, "Welcome back, Rex," and a modest crowd of regulars who had quietly become witnesses to something better than conflict. Officer Sarah Mills arrived shortly after, out of uniform, wearing jeans and a jacket, her blonde hair down around her shoulders. Without the badge, she seemed younger, but no less steady. She greeted Emily with a warm smile and crouched briefly to scratch Rex behind the ears. "Still the calmest dog in the room," she said. Thomas Reed joined them as well, sleeves rolled up, his sandy hair tousled by the breeze. He observed Emily's posture with professional satisfaction. "Your transfers are smoother," he said. "You've been working." Emily nodded. "Rex and I practice every day." As coffee was poured and cookies passed around, Linda cleared her throat. "I just wanted to say something," she began, hands clasped. "What happened here weeks ago could have ended badly. Instead, it reminded us who we want to be to each other." She gestured toward Emily and Rex. "And sometimes courage looks like staying calm." There was light applause. Rex's ears flicked, but he stayed still. Ethan felt the moment crest and settle. He hadn't come seeking recognition, but he didn't turn away from it either. When Emily reached out and took his hand, small fingers, steady grip, he didn't flinch. "Thank you for walking with us," she said. He squeezed back gently. "Thank you for letting me." Outside, the morning held. No shouting, no sudden edges, just people sharing space. When it was time to leave, Ethan walked with Emily and Nora down the sidewalk, Rex guiding with familiar confidence. Leaves crunched underfoot. Somewhere wind moved through trees like a blessing. At the corner, Emily looked up. "You'll come tomorrow?" "Yes," Ethan said without hesitation, and as they went their separate ways, the city seemed to agree. Some mornings, once healed, learned how to stay. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or blinding light. Sometimes they come quietly, through a steady hand, a faithful dog, or a stranger who chooses compassion over anger. In moments when fear could have won, grace stepped in instead. Many believe these small, perfectly timed mercies are whispers from God, reminders that we are never as alone as we feel, even on our hardest days. In everyday life, we may not face dramatic trials, but we all encounter moments where kindness can change the direction of a story, our own or someone else's. A calm word, a patient heart, or the courage to stand up for the vulnerable can become a miracle in disguise. Faith is often not about waiting for God to move mountains, but about recognizing the quiet strength He places within us to walk through them. If this story touched your heart, consider sharing it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from or what part of the story spoke to you most. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more stories of courage, healing, and love. May God bless you, protect your family, and fill your days with peace. May you always recognize the miracles around you, especially the ones that arrive in ordinary moments.